Hey there, everyone. Welcome back, and it's time to join Global Ed and a time in learning about cultural shock, culture shock, also known as. So stay with us as our class embarks upon learning about how to survive culture shock. I'm Dr. Eagles. Join me for my class. Thank you.
uh, a bunch of things that happen. You're understanding new cultures. For me, for a while, I didn't really understand a lot about new cultures, frankly, because, my brain process kind of thinks a little different than most people. It takes me longer to understand how people think more than, other people. It's just kind of how it's kind of, having that knowledge to understand what other people are like. I mean, when I went to the UK, I understood how their culture works, frankly, because instead of just reading it, which most people recommended me to, I didn't read anything. I was 14. I just kind of sat back and asked a bunch of questions, and I was able to get immersed into the culture easily. To the point that while everybody else ate American food, I was the one eating all the foreign food. It was great. One food I wish I could have again is haggis, but it's banned in the United States. I'm kind of sad.
Wait a minute. I mean, I know that's an acquired taste from what I hear, but
Yeah.
Why is it banned?
I don't know why it's banned. I mean, it's made up of a bunch of lamb guts, maybe wrapped into some lamb stuff. It's a bunch of lamb stuff, all put together. It tastes really freaking good, especially with brown sauce and mustard. I ate 11 or 12 cups of haggis, and everybody else was puking, and I was the only one who could eat it.
Wow. Yeah.
It was an eating contest, and I won.
Well, yeah, that's good. I've never had the opportunity to try that, but good for you. It's very nice that you ventured out along that way. I had a good friend. They become a family friend. One of that I met in China, and they've become my Chinese family. They have one son, and he was about, I would say, 14 years old when he first visited the United States, and he came with a tour group of his school. So, his parents weren't there or whatever. And because we had known each other, as I said, probably about 6 years or whatever, of course, he wanted to go over a lot of the information about us learning to befriend each other, etc. And he always asked tons of questions, just like what you were saying. But his one takeaway was when he came back from the U.S. to China was he felt that it was, for most of his other classmates, they were afraid to venture out and try a lot of the American cultural things. They wouldn't try different foods. They would only eat hot dogs. And they wouldn't want to go outside of their hotels very much. They just wanted to stay within their own group, And so his takeaway as this 14-year-old coming back is that they refused to allow themselves to actually leave China, even though that they were in America.
Yeah. A fun fact about China, one of my cousins actually went to China because that's where her ancestors are from. Because, that's one of my, it's an interesting story. She told me that she refused to eat the food there. She only ate watermelon for 21 days.
Yes, I believe it. Yeah. And so there's just this fear that overcomes individuals. Uh-oh, excuse me, guys. I have someone at my door. Sorry, just a second.
Okay, so my theory was right. Sorry for the bad humor. This is the AJ Humor Hour. I just thought I would come on and say hello. I'm guessing that hello.
Sorry, I'm back. Someone was knocking at my door, which was so odd. Sorry for the disturbance.
Got it.
But so that's the thing. It's just like, we travel, but we don't want to take any risks. And so just like you said, your cousin did that, a lot of people are afraid to truly engage. Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Carter, are you there with us?
Yeah, how are you today?
Good, Carter. How are you doing?
Pretty good.
Good. So have you traveled out of the country before, abroad?
Not abroad. The farthest I've got to go is Canada, which isn't even that far from Washington.
Yeah, it's not that far, but in your travels, did you find some differences in the experience from the U.S. way, or we're both in North American continent, which we do have that in common. But did you find some differentials between the travels of how their way versus our way?
Surprisingly, no, not really. I went to Vancouver, and it was pretty much just like Seattle. There wasn't too many distinct differences that I could kind of pick out. It was very similar.
I see. Yeah. And sometimes, there are some of those subtleties that do take place. But thanks so much for sharing that. But with that, my question for you is, why do you think individuals become afraid? You spend the money, you invest to go, to travel, but yet and still you don't fully engage. What do you think occurs within that when someone, that takes place?
I think most people are just out of their comfort zone and they don't realize it. They like what they have and they don't really want to experience something new, even if they say they do, because they're not comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you go somewhere to like an extreme where it's very, very different from where you are, then you might not be prepared for it or ready for it, and it might actually shock you too much.
That's true. Hence the word shock. I mean, growing up even as a little kid, I remember hearing this term, but not fully understanding the dynamics of that. Thanks again for sharing, everyone that did that. So let's move on to the next section. Next, I'd like to introduce this new term, acculturation. And this is basically a process of cultural change that takes place that may really result on ongoing situations and when we have contact between one or more cultures. Yeah, so this is a new term that you'll hear being used throughout today's lecture, so I just wanted to introduce that to you. Let's take a look at Kim's model of cross-cultural adaptation. And, this affects how we perceive a new culture. Specifically, Kim argues that newcomers enter into this new culture, which within varying degrees of readiness and preparedness. Sometimes when we are traveling short term, we're not always prepared. So we need to determine how much people really know about this new culture and the varying degree of readiness that takes place. How much do people really know about the new culture and the ability to speak that language and to understand their variables and values and body language, of course. There is some probability of understanding this cultural institution that takes place that really does have an effect on their acculturation process. So newcomers and newcomers ethnicity will also play a role in the pace of this acculturation. Kim also talks about this term of ethnicity as he refers to the characteristics of newcomers as members that integrate into different ethnic groups. Characteristics include race and language. For example, the base of their ethnicity, for example, maybe within Japan, may have more of a difficult time really acculturating to the United States than someone might in Great Britain, for example. And this theorist also argues that there's certain personality characteristics involved in this acculturation process. So as you can just review this particular diagram as the different components that are involved have to do with the environment, of course, and this predisposition that is affecting our preparedness. How prepared are we in this predisposition? And knowing information about the ethnicity and the background and even the personality, which leads to the information of the host communication competency. So then moving over to the far right, we see the intercultural transformation that takes place throughout this process, and the functional fitness, psychological health, and the healthiness of our environment, our attitudes, and competencies, and our awareness to intercultural identity. All these do come into play with Kim's model of cross-cultural adaptation. Next, we're going to take a look at some of the cultural shock models, and there are several theorists that have their own set of their own perspective of how this culture shock takes place. Oberg in 1954 sees that there are 4 stages: the incubation, the crisis, recovery, and then full recovery. We move to 1993, and Smiley looks at this particular model with respect to, first, there's the state of fascination. When we are looking into new cultures, new art, new environment, new policies, we sometimes are very fascinated into certain situations. Then we fall into this area of hostility. We might be angry, we might have some stress that takes place, then moving to the adjustment period, and then finally becoming bicultural and really being able to understand the dynamics of this cultural experience and how it evolves. In 1974, Richardson, his adaptation in the 4 areas included elation, depression, recovery, and this acculturation that we've learned about. We move into 1978, and Keeley looks at the 4 stages that are explained by exploration comes on first, then maybe moving into frustration, coping, and adjustment. As you can see, there are stages that take place. I'd like to have a little dialogue and conversation of your thoughts on how this cultural shock takes place in America. Do you feel that that is something that we do take on here in the Western world? Let's talk about it a little bit. Okay, with that being said, I'm going to ask Jalen. Are you there, Jalen?
Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Great.
Yeah. So with this in mind, we've learned that there are these different stages that take place, kind of some emotional stages even, as we see in these 3 different theories over a span of 20 years. and they each will really, they're kind of the same types of illustrations that take place. You know, this elation, this crisis, hostility, depression, frustration. It seems that there's just this natural progression that each of the theorists has pointed out. And basically, we're talking about culture shock when perhaps we leave the country and looking into different cultural styles, etc. So we know that does exist when we're traveling as tourists, etc. But my question to you, Jalen, do you feel that we have this same type of process even with individuals here within our own nation in America? Do you feel we go through this in relationship building?
I think we absolutely do. Like if we're making friends or trying to make a relationship with somebody who is from a different culture, who maybe doesn't have the same, I guess, views as we do, we can, sometimes we can go through those kind of steps. It's like, oh, I want to learn more about you. And then when you realize, okay, there's a lot about you that maybe I don't agree with, and that can kind of result in the hostility, depression, frustration. It's like, okay, well, like you're not understanding this. You're not understanding this aspect of my culture, but you're also like not really understanding that aspect of their culture. And then moving on from that, it's kind of that, learning, getting used to that kind of thing, and that's recovering, and then moving into the adjustment or, acculturation, just kind of like going through all those steps of like forming a friendship with somebody who may be a little bit different than you are.
Absolutely. Great input there. And I totally agree with you. It's really interesting, the difference of which, by us having this type of interaction with someone that we know is here maybe a long term versus when we're traveling, it's maybe on a short term basis. So we do actually go through that type of experience when we are learning about other cultures. And I think that's what's very important for us to understand, and a major takeaway within some of the volatile situations racially that's occurring even now within the United States. We as individuals have to understand that this cultural shock experience is actually taking place right before our eyes. Another place that we do see this is, in the university lifestyle, when you first move into your dorms and you might be experiencing a different style of life or cultural experience that your roommate might have. So this is giving us some real tools to think that, wow, it's not me, it's not them, it's actually the process of culture shock that we're going through. So it can be some cultural differences, it can just be some family differences, community ways, but basically they all stem from us having maybe a different value system. And so as long as we're willing to go through this process, it's amazing how we can really learn to have this long-term experience in forming these new relationships with friends that are from perhaps different lifestyles, cultures than we are. Jalen, thank you so much. Great explanation for that, and I really do appreciate your contributing. So now we're going to move into this next little area, and let's take a look. Now that you have been introduced to some of the stages, let's watch this short video clip that also addresses culture shock.
The stages of a culture shock. Welcome to the 4 stages of a culture shock. This video is especially made for students at The Hague University who are going on exchange to another country. The video will explain the 4 phases of a culture shock and will illustrate how they are experienced by individuals and how they can cope with the culture shock. The tourist phase. During the tourist phase, people experience a fun and exciting time, also known as the honeymoon phase. There is a great interest in the new culture, which involves taking a lot of photographs and exploring the new environment with enthusiasm. Although this phase may last weeks or months, in the end, it's only temporary. Hi, nice to meet you. Welcome.
Nice. Hello.
Hello. So we're going to start with our city tour of The Hague today. We start at the Binnenhof, which is the court where the lower house is seated. We're going to do a little village house. Okay.
So we right?
The nice Bible tree.
Oh my God.
Oh, do that. It's super nice, lady.
Can you take a picture of us?
Yes, of course. Beautiful. Wonderful people. They would like to meet you and the minister for. Yes, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. It's so cool. Nice to meet you.
The culture shock. Eventually, the fun and excitement fade away and are replaced by frustration and real stress, also known as a culture shock. According to Winkelmann, the culture shock is partially based on an overload of new experiences that affect a person in a psychological and physical way. Living in a new environment requires a lot of energy compared to living in a familiar environment. Next to that, people may also have the feeling that they do not know their identity in their new environment. Finally, people may experience a personal shock because they are not surrounded by their loved ones. Ryan Smith notes that during the culture shock, people feel helpless, isolated and depressed. When feeling helpless and depressed, newcomers are convinced that they are done wrong by the local population and they deliberately disrupt their lives. The adjustment phase. During the adjustment phase, people realize that they are not harmed by the local population, but that their distress is caused by the differences in values, beliefs, and behaviors. At this stage, people seek out effective problem-solving and conflict resolution strategies. As Winkelmann notes, the host culture begins to make sense, and pessimistic reactions and responses are turned into understanding, as they realize that their problems are created by the inability to understand, accept and adapt. This phase is typically slow and gradual, and people often experience mini-crises where they can feel down, but eventually climb out of their depression.
Yeah, me too. What would you like to have? I think I hurry now. It's good. Lekker? Like the fish, yeah.
Adaptation phase. At this point, people are actively engaged in the new culture with their new problem-solving and conflict resolution tools. This leads to some degree of success. Young Kim argues that in this phase, people experience cultural transformation. After going through the first 3 phases, they know they possess the degree of understanding and accepting the native population, and they are adapted to the new culture. They have developed a level of competency in communicating with the natives. As a result of their success, people are feeling good and are functioning well. They have finally found their intercultural identity. They now foster a sense of integration with their host environment.
Hoi, ik ben Jada.
Hallo, ik ben Isabel.
Nou Isabel, leuk dat je hier gekomen bent vandaag. Wil je misschien een lekker bakje koffie?
Ja, graag.
Ja? Het is nog ochtend natuurlijk, even lekker wakker worden.
Prima.
Alsjeblieft. Dus ja, vertel eens eigenlijk wat over jezelf.
Ja, ik ben 20 jaar. Ik woon sinds 3 jaar in Nederland.
Oké, dat is al best wel lang eigenlijk. En wat vind je nou echt leuk om te doen in je vrije tijd? En wat studeer je bijvoorbeeld?
Ja, ik studeer aan de Haagse Hogeschool, European Studies. Ik woon samen met 2 medestudenten, Barbara en Chris. Ik hou van zwemmen en uitgaan en leuke dingen doen met mijn vrienden.
Nou, klinkt heel gezellig allemaal. En waarvoor heb je nou eigenlijk voor de Albert Heijn gekozen?
Omdat ik het leuk vind om in een Nederlandse supermarkt te werken en zo in contact te komen met Nederlanders.
Ja, want ja, Albert Heijn is wel echt een Nederlandse supermarkt natuurlijk. Misschien kijken onze reclames wel eens. Ja, wat zijn nou je sterke punten eigenlijk? Waarvoor moeten we jou aannemen?
Ja, mijn sterke punten zijn hard werken, communicatief en gedreven.
Oké. Nou, ik heb het allemaal opgeschreven en ja, ik ben eigenlijk wel heel enthousiast over je. Ik bedoel, je hebt goede sterke punten, je hebt een goede motivatie. Dus ik denk dat ik je gewoon lekker ga aannemen nu, dat ik je maandag zie.
Oh, dank
Ja,
je.
zie je maandag?
Ja.
Oké, nou dan zie ik je maandag.
Ja, tot maandag.
Oké, bedankt.
Tips for surviving a culture shock. Tip 1. Do your homework and be prepared. Do some research on the country that you are going to visit. Get to know their customs, values, behavior and culture to prevent any unexpected surprises which can scare you off. Tip 2. Realize that your feeling of distress are caused by the culture shock. Tip 3. Use common sense. The people are not to blame, but the fact that your body and mind have to adjust to the new environment. Tip 4. Keep in mind that everyone experiences some type of culture shock. You are not alone. Tip 5. Make the culture shock profile every once in a while as self-reflection. You will understand your emotions better and can self-determine in which stage you are at that particular moment.
Okay, great. Yeah, for those of you that have done some travel, yeah, it definitely is a reality here. So let's get back to finding out these 4 stages that take place that are real. And just as a review, they are the tourist phase, the culture shock itself, that phase, the adjustment phase, and the adaptation stage. So they're real processes that we all have to go through, and just trying to use it as a learning opportunity and this definite period of adjustment. So here we've reviewed these models like Olberg's model, specifically talking about his rendition of the 4 stages. We're then going to learn a little bit more about reverse culture shock. And then also there's this transition period that takes place. And I just wanted to give a point of clarification that basically the host country is whatever country you're visiting to. So they become your host, and they, for example, if you invite someone into your home, you are hosting those individuals or that person, and the visitor is also known as maybe the expat, the one that is maybe that foreigner that's coming to a different, to visit. Now I'd like to move into this next area and just taking a little bit closer look at Oberg's 4-phase model. This is a quick video on students that are studying abroad. So I think that that's a new, interesting perspective to look at. But more specifically, in the Oberg's model, we see the honeymoon stage, negotiation, adjustment, and adaptation. Through this, we look at the development of this situation of adjustment that takes place. Additionally, we're going to review this reverse culture shock and some of those outcomes that come about, and then also the actual transition. So let's take a quick look at this new perspective from
It sounds amazing. Travel to a different country, learn about another culture, meet new people, experience a completely different way of life. But then you get there and it hits you.
You realize that you're not at home anymore.
It starts as being really fun, being in a new culture, but then it can be really depressing. You can get really sad and you miss home.
So what should you do? It's important to understand that culture shock is completely normal when you move to a new country. In fact, there are actual stages of culture shock. The honeymoon phase comes first. Everything is new and exciting. But soon you might start getting frustrated with the language barriers or the different customs you experience.
When I got yelled at by a bus driver, it was a humbling experience for me to realize that everything that I grew up to establish as a norm, or the values that I had held, were not universally understood, that maybe things operate differently in other countries.
Try to focus on the good, have an open mind, and stay in touch with your support system from home. Better yet, reach out to other students in your program, your professors, or USAC.
You start thinking, okay, I'm going home, as opposed to I'm going to this apartment in this city where I'm studying abroad.
It clicked when somebody asked me for directions in my host city, and I actually could answer them. And after that exchange, I was like, wow, that was really cool. Like, I feel at home here now.
Part of your happiness during study abroad will also depend a lot on your physical health. If you take prescription medication, be sure to take your meds on schedule. Exercise. Pay attention to nutrition. If you decide to drink alcohol, drink in moderation. In many cultures, alcohol is a social drink only, and being drunk is not considered acceptable behavior. If water and sanitation are an issue, be careful about the food you eat and your drinking water source. And the easiest way to stay healthy and happy? Get enough sleep. Sleep reboots your mind and body, so you are ready for whatever new experience comes your way.
Okay, so those are some tips as to what and how we should, keep ourselves well hydrated, in that state of coping. And this specifically is dealing a little bit more with study abroad students that are studying abroad. Now I'd like to move studying abroad. So they are most likely going to be there long term. So there's quite a bit of a difference between the person that's going as a tourist, maybe 10 days, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, versus maybe a semester. A little bit more of an adjustment. Okay, we have discussed a lot of these different theories, 4 different perspectives from theorists that have discussed these stages, but let's just confirm quickly the the tourist phase. So we see this is where we have this interest in the culture and we're ecstatic about learning information. It's also known as this honeymoon stage, and we are very prone to just this exciting phase, and we're taking lots of photographs, and we don't want to miss out on any of the elements. We're just kind of euphoric about this excitement. And oftentimes, we are extending extra energy. There might be some jet lag going on. We're tired. There might be some food allergies that take place. And, there's a lot of things in this tourist phase. Being introduced to a lot of new elements. Then we move into this culture shock. In the culture shock area, we see that there's this area, we don't get it. We're confused about they do it differently than we do it. We sometimes have language barriers and we get frustrated. We might be a little uncomfortable with the Western ways and the Eastern ways or European ways of doing things. We get a little preoccupied of maybe the sanitation and some of the elements of restaurants and cleanliness, restrooms, and those things. And we feel that we're really losing control of the way and what we're used to. We might be tired, that fatigue sets in, maybe that jet lag is taking place, but we still don't want to miss out on anything, but still we are experiencing these new areas of perhaps stress, anxiety, even depression might set in. Our expectations might not be where they thought they should be at this particular stage. So we have to move into this adjusting. We have to find out ways of problem solving, making sure that we can utilize the setup and the facility of our host country. So problem solving takes place. We might have to get into some conflict resolution and find new ways of adapting and finding new levels of comfort. Food might be issues that you might not really find something that's suitable for you. So you have to learn how to adjust. And we're making friends and becoming familiar with individuals. Maybe if you have a tour guide or someone that's helping you out, and you're developing some new friendships and relationships that are extremely new. We then move into this adaptation or the acculturation period that takes place. We are really now able to identify with this bicultural experience. We're learning how to respond positively and constructively, and we're trying to stabilize ourselves to this new opportunity that definitely is meriting some personal growth. Okay, so I'm going to go to Meredith. Are you there, Meredith?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, how's it going today?
It's going pretty good.
Good. Okay, after seeing the last couple of videos and then also this particular stage chart of culture shock, can you relate with any of this or share some of the takeaways that you might have?
I think going into like a new culture can definitely be really confusing for a lot of people, and like also really stressful because like you don't really know how to react to everything. And the videos also like showed that, so I think like they're a good idea, like a good way to express how people actually feel.
Absolutely. I think often we see or might hear about, if we have friends or relatives saying, oh, I'm going to go visit this particular country and I'll be there, and there's just this excitement and all of that enthusiasm that they have and that they probably take with them. It's kind of, a little bit stressful, but yet exciting. And usually for the loved ones and friends that are kind of left behind, we don't really see the full picture of what they've gone through. And maybe they don't really know how to express this process or these stages that individuals do go through. And so it's good for us as learning how to, embrace all of this information, to be able to make it relatable to someone else that might be traveling to somewhere else. So, for those of you that might have friends and family members, you might, kind of give them a little bit of a preview of some of this information that you've learned as far as dealing with culture shock. Again, there's just another quick model. You can take a look at this as well in your text, where it just talks about these different stages as a specific model here of the intercultural competence. So this is ideally the goal that we are looking for, so you can, it's pretty self-explanatory here, so I won't really go over the stages, but the affective area, the knowledge, gaining that knowledge, this psychomotor features that take place having to do with these verbal and nonverbal cues that take place, and then of course the situational features. So these are also the areas that give us some illustration of how to try to be prepared and develop this cultural competence. And now we're going to just quickly dive into this area. We're talking about the local way. And let's take a look at this and see what that actually looks like.
I was riding a motorbike across India in July last year when the magic of a very unintended experience took control of my plan. I was actually heading towards Pakistan at the time. I took a wrong turn somewhere and found myself on this road. And that was excellent. And it gave me an idea. We're going to walk through experiencing culture shock and arrive at what I call culture comfort. I'm going to describe how I got to being okay with this situation. I'm going to introduce you to a formula that maps out the change process of newness to familiarity. But first, let's do a bit of immersion. Close your eyes if you like, and consider this scene. It's a new city. It's nighttime too, perhaps. Your eyes are shifting from side to side, moving with your head and neck, but actually seeing very little. The messages from the retina aren't making it to the right part of the brain because the brain is too busy trying to digest the smells and sounds and sights that are thrust about you in a chaotic tornado of newness. All the while, the brain is trying desperately to maintain the age-old task of fitting in, while knowingly standing out. The eyes again shifting, looking for a point of reference, of familiarity, something to grasp on and return order to our systems. We're lost. We're alone. We're confused. And then we've got it. It's to go across the street, of course, towards the sunburnt and dated Coca-Cola sign, sitting tilted over the doorway. Shabby, sure, but recognizable. Does this sound like it could be culture shock? Is it vaguely familiar with something you might understand as culture shock? But we're asking, does it have to be this way? We tend to assume when we arrive that what we know is the norm. And everything going on about us which we're not familiar with in any given situation is the oddity. I'm going to throw it out there and say, we're a little afraid of newness. But I think that's okay. So what can we do to overcome it? What can we do to throw it out the window and conquer that fear of newness? When we encounter a new place, we tend to concentrate on how it may be different to what we know. This is a useful way to compare and contrast lifestyles and practices, sure. Interestingly, it's not what causes culture shock. The real shock comes later, when we try to recreate patterns of behavior from home. It's like trying to pedal a bike even after the chain has come off. You keep wanting to do things the way you have, without stopping to think that it might not work so well in the new place. So let's take the time to watch, do, and then think about how to achieve the same goals, but in a local way. So I propose these 3 steps to put the proverbial chain back on our bikes. First of all, follow the French example. Être un flâneur, flânerie. It means wandering while wondering. Step 2, embrace the space around us and do everyday things. And finally, reflection. We use this as a tool to wrap it all together and create understanding. So, first of all, step 1, as soon as we arrive in a new place, go outside, go for a walk. Sit down, have a coffee or a drink, and observe the world around you. The French verb for this is flânerie. It translates vaguely to simple dawdling. That encourages the magic of the unknown experience to occur. We have to allow time for our surroundings to osmosisize with our psyche. Because people, places, and things are not often how they appear at first glance. So let's rather take the time to think about making ourselves more familiar with difference so that we can become a true part of our new scene. This photo was taken by a friend of mine outside of our apartment in Delhi last year. I'm going to use it to illustrate how I didn't do this. I needed to buy some milk and veggies. I knew two things. I knew that a man passed up and down the street each morning with a goat selling milk, and I knew that veggies were sold down the square each night. But for 1 month, I inherently and instinctively went to find a supermarket. I found myself asking later, why would I do this when I know that the locals do it another way? And I think what this shows us is that a common response to a new environment is to avoid the difficult and unusual activities. We get so caught up in the gut-wrenching turmoil of feeling alone and without our usual securities about us that we get forgotten the reason why we embarked on the journey, why we stepped out from the door that day to begin the new adventure. We've lost our motivation and we've misplaced our inspiration. Here, managing this part of the culture shock experience is essentially a question of timing, because as soon as we feel the twang of discomfort, as soon as we see the sight of the challenge on the horizon, we should rush towards the encounter with an optimistic spirit. The sooner we engage with a new experience, it will act as a symbol of willingness and welcoming to our surroundings, and people will notice the effort that we've made. And the novelty of doing something new will become the bridge to belonging with our new place. We have to want to experience the shock of culture. And we can do this by embracing the space around us. This part is the most fun, step 2, I promise you. But before we go into it, I want you to put yourself in the mindset when you have a task to achieve, a mission to accomplish at home. Something annoying and silly like trying to find the right battery for the car key. You're out to the shops for a quick check, you've got a vague idea where to go, but you end up spending the whole day going to 5 or 6 different places and getting a bunch of stuff you didn't need. Imagine doing that in a totally new and unfamiliar environment with no idea and none of your usual securities or guidances around you. Does it bring an adventurous smile to your face? To become comfortable with newness and familiar with strangeness, we have to give ourselves something to do. Go find the milk. Figure out how to dress like a local. Explore. Intrepid. I've found looking for the biggest bookshop in town or the best coffee is usually a good way to achieve this step. Embracing our space creates this newness comfort paradigm. Whereas newness to a situation over time decreases, our culture comfort correspondingly and necessarily increases. As we participate in the daily norms of a place, we'll offset the newness by exposure to the context and dynamics of the situation. And we'll also meet people. But this part is crucial because we'll begin to form that relationship with community. So it's important to recognize the symptoms of culture shock, because it is these that we must seize upon, and that will act as the kickstart we need. When things are new and we're still uncomfortable, we internalize our loneliness, we stay away from others, and things that are frustrating, things that are new about that place suddenly become more frustrating. But it's these that we must seize upon. Because if we throw ourselves in the casserole of culture that surrounds us, we'll become distracted by the effort and emerge out the other side energized by that challenge. And so we move into reflection. Reflective practice requires us to step back from a situation and recognize that a challenging experience is all part of a process. And it is the hardest process we can imagine. Self-change. Basic reflection is writing things down, journaling, scrapbooking, blogging, writing to family and friends. The important part is to really get into descriptions and write vividly, because this helps to digest experiences. But why is this the final step? Because reflection allows us to see the big picture. It allows us to see the process of becoming comfortable. It allows us to see and challenge our own benchmarks of normalcy. It in fact reveals that normal is not a static frame of mind, and it is in fact changeable. Culture shock is not exclusive to a travel experience, and it is in fact applicable to whenever and wherever you've exposed yourself to a new situation. Think about the time you started a new job, or joined a new church, or begun at a new gym. You ask yourself, you always ask yourself, it's part of the human condition. Will they like me? Am I going to fit in? Are they going to think I'm a bit weird? Perhaps even worse, maybe they're going to be a bit weirder than I thought when we first met. I want you to consider this mantra. Observe it, do it, and then think about it. We have to consciously put ourselves in a position to become aware of the space around us, with no filter but curiosity. We have absolutely nothing to lose. Go next to a new place, actively follow these steps, throw yourself into the heartbeat of that place, and see what happens. Be intrepid about newness, and confront culture without the burden of shock.
I so enjoyed that. I think it was brilliantly stated, these ideas that he specifically encourages us to go through is this observation, embrace, and then also reflect. So this is definitely a takeaway that we can use whether or not we are traveling abroad or staying abroad. Now we're just quickly going to go through this reverse culture shock. I want you to take a quick look at this of what it really means. And if you don't mind, I would like to see if, Ryan, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Ryan. How's it going today?
Good, how about yourself?
Good. Can you read this definition of reverse culture shock for me?
Yeah, so reverse culture shock is a term used to describe the feelings of surprise, disorientation, confusion, etc. experienced when people return to their home country and find they do not fit in as they used to.
Okay, very good. So just to let you know, so you guys know where we're at, we're just going to watch this quick last video on reverse culture shock. There's a couple of F-bombs that are thrown off in this, so I hope no one is offended. Just kind of giving a little disclaimer, but it's real life, and I wanted to just share this with you. And then afterwards, we're going to finish up. We have a team project that we're going to work on, so right after, I'm going to give you your team partner and what you'll be working on. So we're just about done, so take a look.
What's up, everybody? I'm Stephen Miguel, and you're watching XP Life Now. On this channel, I share with you new things that I learned and experienced, hoping to inspire you to learn and experience new things as well. And in this video, I'm going to share with you guys my experience dealing with reverse culture shock. But before we get into it, don't forget to hit the like button and share this video with a friend. I've lived outside of the US for over 6 years now. And although I do get homesick, I still experience reverse culture shock. Culture shock is when you leave your home country or hometown and you go out and experience a new culture or a new country. And immediately you start seeing things that are completely different. Some things you're excited about, but some things actually bum you out, get on your nerves, and some things just seem plain stupid. I've lived in 3 different countries within the 6 years I've been outside the US. And every time I go back, I always experience reverse culture shock. So the first thing that I noticed was I didn't really feel safe. And the reason why I didn't feel safe was as soon as I flew into the airport, it felt like I was entering a hardcore police state. I'm pretty sure that's what we are. And what I mean by that is flying into Atlanta, going through the customs and all the different checks, even as an American, it still felt pretty overwhelming. So I can imagine somebody coming to the US for the first time. It's just a lot easier to fly around throughout Europe. But in the US, we're super on guard, and it doesn't actually make me feel safe. There's a heavy police presence. Like, you see police everywhere. And I just think about how things were when I was in South Korea or Italy and now Germany. I see more police in Germany, but it's not like it is in the US. In Italy, every once in a while, I would see the Carabinieri just out and about, parked alongside the road, trying to pull people over just to check papers. Korea, I can't even tell you what the police cars look like or what the police uniforms look like, because I never saw police in Korea. And that's one of the places that I felt the safest. But back to what I was saying about the US, there's a heavy police presence. 2 things I want you to keep in mind. This is before the media started blasting cops killing Black people. Another thing to keep in mind is that I've never had a negative experience with a cop, despite being Black. And it didn't matter who pulled me over, white cop, Black cop. Most of the cops that pulled me over were white. I'm from Southeast Georgia, and I never had issues with the police. And every single time I got pulled over, it was because either something was wrong with my car or I was speeding. So it wasn't like they were telling me or anything. But I just don't feel safe. And that's weird, because you would think that you would feel safer with more police, but I don't. So the second thing that I noticed was the wasteful mindset. And this is what I mean by that. With my recent trip to the US, I noticed an unusually large amount of people driving pickup trucks. These aren't just the little smaller pickup trucks. These are like F-150, F-350, the real heavy duty pickup trucks. These be some of the cleanest, never seen, like the wheels never seen a day off-road. They don't put anything on the bed of the truck. There's no reason to have a F-350 if you're not hauling some shit. Like, that doesn't make sense. It's a complete waste of gas. It's gonna cost $100 to fill the tank up. It's funny when you see an American bring their huge vehicle over to a European country and try to drive it around on these tiny roads, and it's crazy. But yeah, it's a wasteful mindset. You don't need all that space. You don't need all of that power. You're not going across some heavy terrain. You're not hauling things on a regular basis. Now, if you do construction on houses and all of that stuff, or you work on a farm or something, that's when you need an F-150 or a bigger truck. If you have like an office job and you don't have any outdoor activities that you do for fun, like kayaking or anything like that, there is absolutely no reason why you need an F-350. But you're an American, it's your right to buy whatever you want. There's a lot of other things that I can go into, especially dealing with cars. Don't even get me started about the cars with the big wheels that you can barely turn because the wheel is damn near too big for the wheel well. That makes no fucking sense. So the third thing that I noticed was the dining experience. Restaurants in Europe and some restaurants in Asia, they cater to you and your friends going out and having a long, relaxed, social interaction. Whereas restaurants in the US, they're trying to get you in and get you out so they can get the next person in. And I kind of understand why that it is that way, because the servers get paid mostly in tips, but it creates this rushed dining experience. It's almost like they're saying, okay, you got your food, hurry up and eat so you can get the fuck out of here. But when you're eating in another country like Italy, for example, you can be in a restaurant for like 2 hours just hanging out and talking after you've even eaten, and it's totally okay. The last thing that I experienced, I think may actually be a bit weird. The first time I was coming back from after being in South Korea for a few months, I flew into Seattle, and then I got a connecting flight. And obviously the flight from Seoul, the plane was packed with Koreans. And when I got on my first connecting domestic flight, and the plane was mostly Americans, one thing I noticed immediately was that I was very annoyed with people speaking English. I didn't feel comfortable around people, because I could understand what everybody was saying. I have no idea why. But I felt myself wanting to be around people who didn't speak the same language as me. Something that may have contributed to that is the fact that I was trying to learn Korean at the time. I don't know, maybe my mind just wanted to be around it and immersed in it. Yeah, like I said, it's really weird, because I remember a time when I didn't want to be around people who didn't speak English, and especially in a closed space. For example, you get in an elevator and let's say there's a couple people either behind or in front of you, and they start speaking in a language other than English. Immediately, I would think that they were talking about me. And I know there's a lot of people out there who still think like that. But after spending a long time outside the US, not hearing English as often, I've grown to love not understanding everything that the other person is saying. It's a bit weird, but like I said in my vision board video, one of my goals is actually to learn different languages. So that's probably why I experienced that. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you're watching and you've had a similar experience returning back to your home country, leave a comment below and share your story. And if you're new and you want to see more content about my experience living outside the US, don't forget to subscribe.
Okay, guys. So, yeah, that was different. Reverse culture shock does exist. We're going to close out in just a moment, but I do have a quick question. Jaleesa, are you here? Is Jaleesa in the building? No? Okay. How about Delaney? Delaney, are you here?
Yeah, I am.
Hey, how's it going this afternoon for you?
It's going well. How are you?
It's going well too. We got a little rain today, so that's kind of nice. Makes Arizona feel like we have a season of some sort. But my question for you is, any takeaways from this reverse culture shock? Did you learn anything new about it?
Yeah, I would say I definitely have experienced reverse culture shock before, but I never knew it was a thing until just now, so that's kind of cool to put a name to the feeling,
Yeah, it's really a real thing. I've only been back to the States, kind of full time a year. It's been a year now, and even though that I would come and visit over my 10 years of living in Asia, I would come back maybe in the summer, and I would come back again maybe in the the summer and then also in the winter months. And so I would be here like, 4 months out of the year, 2 months here, a month here, something like that. But, when I did come back on those short visits, there were some adjustments, but I found myself feeling like I was a person of two countries. I had one foot in China, one foot in Asia. So for me, because I lived away for so long, I do believe that I actually have become bicultural as far as being able to understand the benefits of both and kind of seeing some of the pros and cons both. Whereas when I first got there, some of the things that really didn't make sense or were odd to me, the longer I lived there, it's like, wow, yeah, I get it. And to be honest with you, it makes better sense. So when you start seeing things differently, that really does kind of show that you've become this bicultural, entity of a person. So I believe that I have gotten to that. But with me being back here for the whole year, it was definitely an adjustment. A lot of the things that seemed that I had to relearn. For example, the idea of dealing with customer service issues, calling up someone on the phone and, being able, where I had to wait for hours or an unreasonable amount of time in order to get service. So that was one reason. That was one thing that I really noticed, that there were a lot of more inconveniences that I had to readjust to than what many people think are conveniences. One thing that was illustrated earlier on in one of the videos that we showed was the young man that said he was in Delhi in India, and his mindset was to find a grocery store every day, which is probably inconvenient and time consuming, etc. But his mindset was there. Instead of running down and just waiting for the local cart to come by and get that, it was just like this failure to want to adjust. Well, for me, coming back to the States, it was overwhelming for me to go into a grocery store. Yes, there are many grocery stores and, those types in China that they did have. And, a lot of them were larger than some of our superstores that are here, just because of the amounts of people that are in China. So they had to really have a lot of resources there. But, one thing for me, it was like going to the simple, the grocery store was an adjustment, so some things that people don't get, they really do exist. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I hope you guys have learned some new things about it. I think so. The transitional point we're just talking about is that area where the shock is a state of loss and disorientated predicted by a change in one's familiar environment that requires some adjustment. So that is that next step, whether you are going through the actual culture shock or reverse culture shock. So next, as I mentioned, I